Oregon 1, Georgia jumping to 2 on the strength of that overtime win over Texas. Boise and Arizona State 3 and 4 with those byes as the committee's wait for conference supremacy crystallizes for everybody. Clemson's win and SMU in and Alabama out. Did the committee get it right? Who has the best path to a title? Who has the most beef? And on beef, here's Alabama Athletic Director Greg Bird posting that the committee's disregard for their strength of schedule means they'll reconsider how they schedule out-of-conference games. And that's bad for college football. But that post immediately got a community note on it. Not so fast. All your losses came in conference. What a dagger. Harry Lyles Jr., love having you here today on a College Monday. You were everywhere this weekend, but now this committee's our first 12-team playoff. Did they get it right?
They did get it right. I don't think it should have been close. Ward Manuel said it was tight between SMU and Alabama. It absolutely should not have been. SMU lost 2 games this season by a combined 6 points. One of those was in their conference championship game. If you're Alabama, you should not have 3 losses. If you are Ole Miss, you should not have lost 3 times. If you are South Carolina, you shouldn't have lost 3 times. And if you're Miami, you shouldn't have lost 2 of your last 3 games in November. It is that simple. This was a very easy choice for the committee to make. I think the only gripe that anybody should have with the way that things turned out is it is now pretty clear that the seeding and the way that winning your conference championship game automatically gets you a bye, perhaps not the way that this should go. I think an automatic qualifying bid is fine, but to then reseed the teams based on that, I think is a little bit too much. We should just be going off of the rankings and seed the teams that way.
But big answer. They got it right. Tim Cowlishaw, around the horn to you. Did the committee get it right?
Absolutely got it right. Got the right 12 teams in. It's interesting that the whole discussion was SMU or Alabama. SMU's the 10 seed. Indiana and Clemson are seated behind SMU. I don't really know exactly how that became the entire discussion, but you can't take a team that was undefeated in the ACC, won it outright, but then has to go play for money, has to go play a conference championship game, loses on a 56-yard field goal at the buzzer and say, no, you're out. Alabama, the complaints about their schedule was so ridiculous. As you said, those were conference games. Those aren't games Alabama controls. All they had to do was beat Oklahoma in November. Beat it in between Oklahoma losing to Missouri and LSU. Just win that one game. Don't lose it 24-3 for your third loss. Alabama had nothing to complain about, and there was way too much time spent talking about the Crimson Tide. Mississippi had a better argument than Alabama.
You said that last week. You still believe that today. Courtney Cronin.
I'm still saying it. I'll say it next year, Tony.
Around the horn to you. Did the committee get the 12 right?
They did, and I think they set an important precedent here with conference championship games and the importance of those games. We heard about Rhett Lashley talking about, well, why are we, if the committee's going to leave us out, why are we even playing in those games? These conferences have so much money locked into the 13th game of the season. So if teams all of a sudden, if SMU got left out of the bracket and teams all of a sudden are like, well, bump that, we're not going to play in these games, what do you think that does to these conference championship games and the future of them going forward? They came back from a 17-point deficit not once but twice in this game. They lose on a 56-yard field goal. I feel like the committee is maybe correcting sins of the past format, considering how Georgia lost to Alabama last year in the conference championship game and was left out, their only loss of the season. This is the right move, and an additional one here too, with the group of 5 getting in ahead of where Arizona State is. I think that's very important for the precedent of that game and the importance of that game going forward.
Pablo Torre, did the committee get it right?
Yeah, I think they did, but I understand why Alabama and everybody associated feels like they've been radicalized over the weekend. I do. The point at which you agree that the ACC Conference Championship deserves an automatic bid, and in fact, can under these perfect circumstances in which, of course, SMU, yes, looked like a real moral victor despite losing the game because of the 56-yard field goal, all of that. The point at which you say, we're going to give those auto bids to those conferences, Alabama, I imagine, is thinking to themselves, so let's get the Super League thing going. Why are we doing this? Why can't we do the SEC and the Big Ten and go back to that conversation before the 12-team playoff conversation? And so, look, under these circumstances, with these rules, I get it, but I also understand why the SEC is saying, wait a minute, we have to value Clemson because they won this weaker conference championship.
All right, Harry, did Pablo sway you there?
No, don't lose to the worst Oklahoma team of this century by 3 touchdowns. It's that simple. Like, no, we have to. The ACC is still great football. Like, even in defense of Miami, Georgia Tech was not a terrible loss. The way that Miami lost the game was pretty bad. But Georgia Tech is a good football team. Syracuse is a good football team. But you still can't lose 2 of 3 in late November. But even Brett Yormark talked about like logo watching. You know what logo watching we've done? Alabama did not get nearly enough crap for that Oklahoma loss. Like, precisely. Alabama should not have been in the discussion.
How does it come off to you to say this is bad for college football? I guess we won't schedule out-of-conference games, Harry. How'd you hear that?
I mean, you could make that argument, but like all their losses came in the SEC. Like, you got cleaned by a Vanderbilt team pretty thoroughly. You lost to that Oklahoma team. I don't think that is their issue. I understand where he's coming from in the spirit of that, because obviously the SEC slate is difficult, but that's not the reason Alabama got left out.
All right. Talk to me about the path. Whose road do you like most? Who's got the rockiest road, Harry Lyles?
I thought Oregon, considering being the #1 overall seed, winning the second most difficult conference, they got a pretty difficult road. And then when you look on the other side, I think you could look at this 2 different ways. I think you could look at Georgia and what they've got going on. I think their path becomes more difficult, not knowing Carson Beck's health. But seeing that they get the state champion of Indiana and then the winner of Boise State and then either Penn State or SMU, I think that is an easier path considering where they could have ended up at. And then also, I think you could look at Penn State having the opportunity to play SMU, then going to a Boise team where you have a talent advantage. And then let's say you do play Georgia and they don't have their quarterback, then Penn State perhaps is in the national championship. So I look at that side of the bracket, and I think you could pick either one of those.
Tim Cowlishaw with path jumps out to you.
I think Texas has the right path. They get to play at home against Clemson and then Arizona State. Now, I say that with a full understanding that Texas, with all its 5-star players, has trouble scoring points. And they had trouble against Georgia, and they had trouble against A&M, and they have trouble a lot of times getting as many points as they should. But I think this gets them Clemson, Arizona State, that gets them into the semifinals.
Yeah, I'm with Tim, because that if they make it to January, they're playing at the Cotton Bowl down the road, and Georgia's on the other side of the bracket. So the only time they'd have a chance to face them again would be a third matchup in the national championship. And you know what they say? It's hard to beat a team 3 times in a season, especially one that might be without its quarterback.
Pablo Torre.
But the hardest path, you're talking about Indiana. Sorry, Courtney. Indiana in South Bend and then getting Georgia. Would not want to be them in general.
How much